When scholars talk about the Israelites creating the golden calf in Exodus 32, they are often quick to ascribe the calf of gold to a particular Egyptian cow deity, often Hathor. But there are many, many cow deities in ancient Egypt. Today, we are going to talk about the many cow gods of Egypt on this episode of Ancient Egypt and the Bible. Ancient Egypt had many cow or bovine gods and goddesses. And while the greatest temples and monuments in Egypt were dedicated to solar deities like Amun-Re, we have to understand that bovine worship was the most popular form of worship in ancient Egypt. In this video, we are going to go through a survey of many of the most notable bovine deities of Egypt and the myths associated with those cults. Now, we can't obviously cover them all because there's too many of them, but we're going to cover the major ones here. And the first one we are going to start off with is Hathor. Hathor was the cult par excellence in ancient Egypt. The cult of Hathor enjoyed more worship than any other cult. Hathor was worshipped by every stratum of Egyptian society, from the king himself down to the farmer. Hathor's name actually means House of Horus. And early on, Hathor appears as the mother or wife of Horus. But in later versions of the Horus myth, Isis will be said to be the mother of Horus, and Hathor will become the restorer of Horus's sight after being blinded by Seth. Hathor was generally regarded as a fertility deity as well as being the cow of heaven. She was personified as the nighttime sky and the primeval sky waters. Please note that the idea that the sky contained water is similar to the Hebrew notion of the Rakia, the celestial ocean of Israelite cosmology. Now, Hathor was not just a fertility deity. She was also connected to the sun god Re. And depending on the version of the myth, Hathor could be the wife or eye of Re, or even be his daughter. The connection to Re as his wife goes back to at least the late Old Kingdom, where Hathor is portrayed as the Golden One who accompanied Re on his daily journey on the solar bark. As a fertility deity, Hathor was associated with womanhood, female sexuality, and motherhood. Hathor was also the patron goddess of miners and mining. The temple at the mining site of Serebit el-Khadim was dedicated to Hathor, where she is called the, quote, mistress of turquoise, end quote. In iconography, Hathor is portrayed as a cow or as a forward-facing woman wearing a wig with cow ears and a solar disk between her horns. It is important to note that this iconography is often indistinguishable from the iconography of Isis. The worship of Hathor probably goes back to the pre-dynastic period. However, that claim is not without controversy, given the number of cow goddesses in circulation at the time. Yet, by the Third Dynasty, several temples to Hathor were mentioned on the Palermo stone. Worship of Hathor was ubiquitous in Egypt until the Roman period, although after the Third Intermediate period, Hathor worship begins to coalesce with Isis worship. The temples to Hathor are among the most magnificent in Egypt, such as what is found at Dendera Temple. The next goddess we'll be talking about is Bat. This was a very early cow deity, whose name means female spirit and female power. She is depicted on the Narmer palette. In the pyramid text, she has the epithet Bat with her two faces, which denotes the double image of the goddess that is often used on sistra, which is a musical instrument. The iconography is of a human face with cow ears and horns. She was the chief deity of the seventh nome of Upper Egypt. In the Middle Kingdom, her worship coalesced into the worship of Hathor, which assimilated Bat's identity and attributes. Mehet-Weret. Another ancient cow goddess, whose name means the Great Flood. Mehet-Weret was said to have risen from the waters of creation to give birth to the sun god Re, whom she placed as a solar disk between her horns. Mehet-Weret was a sky goddess in the pyramid texts, who assisted the sun rise up into the sky in the morning by being the personification of the river in the sky that the solar boat sailed upon. Her iconography is represented by a sacred cow with a sun disk between her horns, and she is depicted on the funerary bier of King Tutankhamun. In later periods, she became associated with Hathor and Isis. However, it should be noted that Mehet-Weret was a deity of mythology, and she did not have a cult worship of her own. Apis. The Apis was, by far, the most important and preeminent bull cult of ancient Egypt. We should note, before we get into this, how these sacred bull cults work. Priests would go from farm to farm looking for a special pattern on the skin of a bull. If they find that pattern, they would declare that bull an incarnation of their deity. Each sacred cow cult, whether the Apis, Bastet, Bukis, Nevis, etc., only would have one living animal identified as the incarnation of the god and goddess at any one time. When a bull was recognized as an incarnation of the god, it was separated from other cattle and given a harem of cows to gratify itself for the remainder of its life. And that's the way most bull cults worked in ancient Egypt. Now, the center of the Apis cult was at Memphis. His cult was assimilated into the worship of the Memphite creator god Ptah. After the death of the Apis, the bull was believed to have fused with Osiris, becoming the composite god Apis Osiris or Osiris Apis. And later in Hellenistic times, Serapis. Now, we have done an entire video on Serapis. Please see the card above for more information about Serapis. When the Apis bull died naturally or was sacrificed and partially eaten, the bull was mummified and buried at the Serapeum at Saqqara, Nevis. This is the divine bull of Heliopolis. The Egyptians called him by the name Merwer. The Nevis cult seems to have begun in the Second Dynasty, but only in a minor way. Eventually, the Nevis bull rose to become the second most important sacred bull cult in Egypt. As with other bull cults, the Nevis was identified by its coat coloration, in this case, a completely black coat without any other markings at all. As such, in iconography, the Nevis is only represented as a bull with a solar disk and uraeus between its horns. Nevis worship continued into the Roman period and was venerated at Dendera and Edfu, and the deceased Nevis bulls were buried at Heliopolis. Bukis. Yet another sacred bull cult in the area of Armant this time, and elsewhere in the region of Thebes, is the Bukis cult. He is best known by his Greek name Bukis, but in Egyptian was also known as Bak, Ba'ak, and Baku. Bukis was described as an animal with a white hide and a black face. And these bulls were buried in a place called the Bukion at the desert's edge of Armant. Worship of Bukis is extant from the time of Nectanebo II, circa 360 BC, until the time of Diocletian, circa 8300. While not as important a sacred bull as the Apis or the Nevis bulls, Bucus was considered an important source for oracles and healing of the eyes, and the bull was well known for its aggression, which caused it to be associated with the war god Montu. Sky Bull, Bull of the West, and his 7 cow goddesses. Chapter 148 of the Book of the Dead only refers to this deity as the Bull of the West, the West here being associated with the lands of the necropolis. He is associated with the heavens and the afterlife, and is said to be the husband of the 7 cow goddesses that follow him. Each of the 7 cow goddesses are named: Mansion of Cause, Silent One, She of Chemnus, Much Beloved, She Who Protects, She Whose Name Has Power, and Storm in the Sky. Shentayet. The name of this cow goddess means widow. Little is known about this cow goddess other than she is depicted as a cow or a cow-headed woman. In later times, she is assimilated into the Isis cult as Isis Shentayet, where she is associated with the restoration of Osiris and with Osiris's sarcophagus. And the final cow deity we'll be dealing with today is Hesat. Hesat is a cow deity found in the pyramid texts. She appears as mother of Anubis, Pyramid Text 2080. She is also the maternal figure to a number of divine bulls, and was the mythical mother of the sacred Nevis bull. When the Nevis bull was buried, it was buried in a ceremony dedicated to Hesat. In the Ptolemaic period, Hesat was associated with Isis as the sacred Isis Hesat cow. Hesat is also said to be the mother of the deceased king, Pyramid Text 1029, who in relation to her becomes her son in the form of a golden calf. She is also the divine nurse of the living king. Now, this provides us with an important biblical connection. The golden calf motif is nothing less than the apotheosized deified son of a cow goddess, and it only appears in Egyptian myth in this particular context. This provides explanatory power to why the golden calf at Mount Sinai was so blasphemous. When the Israelites are at Mount Sinai, God and Moses go AWOL for a while, and the Israelites get nervous, thinking that they've been abandoned. Aaron presents the golden calf to the Israelites and says to them, quote, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt," end quote. Aaron has inferred to the people that their God had died after no one had seen Moses or God for a while, and God was reborn by a cow goddess as a sacred golden calf. This explains how Aaron could also declare the golden calf to be their God who brought them out of the land of Egypt, because according to the myth found in Pyramid Text 1029, it was the same God, reborn as a golden calf. God was there for all to worship, but as an idol, just like every other god. Aaron used Egyptian myth to wrongly explain God's absence, and he did so in a way that was blasphemous. So, anyway, that covers the major cow and bull cults of Egypt, all the great bovine cults. So, anyway, we hope you found that interesting and you enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time on Ancient Egypt and the Bible.